My name's Liam and I'm 28 now. Back in September 2023, so it's been around 2 years now, I was still figuring things out, working a dead end job at the call center and spending my weekends wandering around with my mates or just messing about on my own. And I'm not the outdoorsy type, so I do take a bit of a walk here and there just to clear my head, but I mostly stay indoors. But one of those walks is how this whole mess started. A walk that turned into something I still can't quite wrap my head around. But here goes. So it was a Tuesday evening, and I think it was around 6 p.m. when I decided to stretch my legs. The weather was the typical Manchester, grey and a bit damp, with that chill that really seeps into your bones. I had a rough day at work with some bloke on the phone shouting at me for about 20 minutes about his internet bill, and I was pretty much done. So I grabbed my jacket, told my flatmate Dave I'd be back in a bit, and headed out straight away. Dave just grunted from the sofa. He's always just glued to his PlayStation. I didn't really have a plan. I just thought, I'd just take a walk, just wander around and just clear my head. I wandered down to the canal near Castlefield and grabbed coffee from a little place by the viaduct. The one with the overpriced lattes, but decent pastries. Not that it's important, but I'm trying to remember the story as close as possible. So I've been there quite a few times with my ex, and she loved their almond croissants, but she would always moan about the price, and rightfully so. We split up a year ago, so it has been a while, but I still think about those little things. The canal is always quiet, really, but I felt it more that night. Maybe I could feel something more was going to happen tonight. The water was still and it was reflecting the dim street lights, and I could hear the occasional splash of a duck or some kind of animal. So as I walked along the canal, and I was lost in my own thoughts, mostly about how I needed to find a better job, or at least a hobby that didn't involve staring at a screen all day. I walked past the Roman ruins, and these are these old arches that always make me feel like I've stepped back in time. They were built by the Romans way back, God knows how long, but I think it's cool to think about all that history right under your feet. So I wasn't really clocking where I was heading, just followed the path, and that's when I made my first mistake. So as I kept walking, there was a split in the path. One was going straight to the city centre, and the other one went right. I figured it would loop back eventually, because canals always do. But after about 20 minutes, the path got narrower, and it was overgrown with weeds, and the streetlights started to thin out. I pulled out my earbuds, suddenly aware of how quiet things were. Too quiet. There were no ducks or no sound of traffic. Just the sound of my trainers scuffling around the... It was just the sound of my trainers scuffing against the gravel. I checked my phone and I had no signal. I probably should have turned around back then, but I didn't. I kept going, telling myself I'd find a way one way or another. I mean, how lost can you get along a canal? The canal veered off into a wooded area I didn't recognise. I think it might have been near Stratford or somewhere along the Bridgewater Canal's less travelled stretches. It's hard to say now. The trees closed in and their branches were almost like clawing at the sky. The air definitely felt heavier, almost like it was pressing down on me. I started to get that prickly feeling on the back of my neck, the one you get when you know something's off, but you can't put your finger on it. I thought about Dave back at the flat, probably yelling at his controller, and wished I'd stayed home with the beer instead. I even considered texting my mate Tom to see if he knew the area, but with no signal, that wasn't possible. Tom's one of my friends who's got me into hiking a bit just last summer. We went up the Peak District once, near Adale, and I nearly twisted my ankle on some rocks, but it was a good laugh. Then I heard something, a low, rhythmic chanting. It wasn't loud, just enough to cut through the silence, like someone muttering under their breath. I stopped dead straight away, and I strained to listen. And it wasn't English, or at least not anything I could make out that was English. Possibly Latin, but it had that eerie, drawn out quality, the kind you hear in the old horror films. My first thought was to leg it, but curiosity got the better of me. I crept forward, keeping to the shadows, until I saw a faint glow ahead through the trees. And what I saw next still haunts me to this day. There was a clearing maybe 50 meters off the path, where a small group of people, probably 4 or 5, were gathered around a fire. They were dressed in dark robes, the kind that look like they've been pulled out of a costume shop or a museum. We see a lot of those on Halloween. The firelight flickered across their faces, and I could see that they were all focused on something in the center. I ducked behind a tree, heart hammering, and I peeked out. In the middle of the circle, there was a wooden table. It was rough and stained, with a black cloth draped over it. On top was kind of a weird setup. It was candles, a bowl filled with some dark liquid that glinted in the fire, and what looked like a dead bird, and its wings were splayed out. One of the figures, a tall guy with the hood pulled low, was holding a knife. Not a kitchen knife, but one of those carved ones you see in films about ancient rituals. He raised it above his head and he started to chant louder, and he slit through the bird. Blood started dripping in the bowl, and the others joined in. Their voices raised, and in a weird but a harmonious way, but it was still something that made my skin crawl. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was just in that moment. The hooded guy started sprinkling something like herbs into the bowl, mixing it with blood. Then he picked up a small mirror, holding it up to the fire. He muttered something, and the others fell silent. And I swear for a second, I thought they caught me. But I think whatever they were doing, it was part of the ritual. I was still safe. My mind raced. Black magic, witchcraft, some cult nonsense. It had to be that. I definitely heard stories about weird stuff happening in Manchester's outskirts, especially near the older industries. My nan used to tell me tales about the witches in the Pennines when I was a kid, but I always thought she was just winding me up. Now, I'd been stood for quite a long time now, and because I was still, I needed to move a bit, and as soon as I moved one of my legs, I stepped on a twig. The crack was loud. It felt like a gunshot in that silence, and all their heads snapped towards me. I completely froze, my breath catching in my throat. The hooded guy lowered the mirror and stared straight at my tree.
Who's that?
His voice was deep and rough. He definitely sounded like a smoker, and a heavy one. I didn't answer because I couldn't. I just stayed quiet. My mouth was dry and my legs felt like jelly. I thought about bolting, but I was sure they'd hear me crashing through the undergrowth. I didn't have the strength, and even if I did, they'd definitely hear me crashing through the undergrowth. So for a moment, nothing happened. And then the guy with the knife started walking towards my tree, slow and deliberate, the others fanning out behind him. I could see his face now under the hood, pale with sharp cheekbones and the eyes that glinted like he wasn't quite human.
Show yourself,
He said, and I swear his voice echoed in my head, not just my ears. Panic kicked in and I stumbled back, tripping over a root and landing hard on my butt. The knife guy stopped, tilting his head like he was listening, and I scrambled to my feet, legged it back the way I came. I didn't look back. I just ran. Branches scratching my face and my arms. My lungs felt like they were on fire, but I could not stop. And I could hear their footsteps behind me. Possibly in my head, possibly real, but I did not look back. The path didn't seem to finish, it just stretched on forever. But I kept expecting to feel a hand grab me. Finally, I got to the end of the woods and kept going until I nearly fell into the canal. I could now start seeing the streetlights, and I could see the outline of the city in the distance. I checked my phone again, but there was still no signal. The time was 7:33, and I remember that like the back of my hand. Now that I knew they weren't following me anymore, I started to walk until I hit Deansgate, where the pubs were starting to fill up with after-work crowds. My hands were shaking, but I quickly went into one of the pubs and just sat there. I did get a few weird stares, but because people were just having a good time, no one really bothered me. I sat in the corner booth, replaying the whole thing that just happened in my head. Was that all real? Or did I just imagine it? But the scratches on my arms and the mud on my jeans said otherwise. I thought about calling the police, but that would mean replaying this whole thing and having to explain it to the police again, which I did not have the mental capacity to do. So over the next few days, I tried to keep normal, but I couldn't quite shake it. I kept seeing that hooded guy's face in my dreams, hearing that chanting when I closed my eyes. I did tell Dave about it, but he had a really good laugh and told me I was watching too many Netflix thrillers. My mate Tom, though, he took it a bit more seriously. We met up at the pub in the northern quarter, and then I spilled the whole thing to him. He reckoned it could have been some weird pagan group. He heard some rumours about stuff like that near the Mersey Valley. He told me I should have taken a photo, but I obviously wasn't thinking straight at the time. After that, I started to avoid canals altogether, and I stuck to the bus or the tram, usually the 192 from Piccadilly Gardens. But about a week later, I got this odd feeling I was being watched. Whenever I walked home from the tram to stop near my flat, I'd catch a glimpse of someone in a hood across the street, and he was always disappearing when I looked. Paranoia maybe, but it did freak me out. I even checked my flat door for scratches or signs someone had been in, but nothing like that. Then one night I found a note slipped under my door. Just a scrap of paper with "Stay quiet." No stamp, no address, just "Stay quiet." Those two words had my heart pounding out of my chest, and I told Dave we needed to get a lock on the window. He thought I was overreacting as usual, but he did help me sort this out. I started locking my door every time I left, even for the bins, something I've never done before. And I always kept my curtains shut. A month had passed after that, and then things had calmed down. The hooded figure stopped showing up, and I figured maybe they'd lost interest. I even went back to walking sometimes, sticking to busy spots like the paths around Heaton Park, where there's always like dog walkers and kids playing about. But I couldn't forget that night. I started reading up on black magic online, stuff about rituals, mirrors, blood sacrifices. I found some forums where people reckoned it's real, not just bollocks. One guy claimed he'd seen similar stuff near the old quarry in Bolton. Whatever he was mentioning was very similar to what I saw, but with slightly different rituals. And he also mentioned it left him with nightmares for years. I don't know if I'll ever know the truth. Was it a cult, some kind of a prank gone wrong? Or did I actually stumble into something ancient and dark? Like my nan's old stories. I still live in Manchester. I still work that call centre job. Dave's still on his PlayStation, and Tom keeps teasing me about that witch hunt. But every now and then, when I'm out at night, I feel that tingle again, and I can't help but look over my shoulder. Part of me wonders if they're still out there, waiting, and part of me hopes I never have to find out.